Alright kids, it's time. The event that made me even want to start this channel in the first place, the first thing I really wanted to investigate the truth on because I felt like it was all a shamble of lies. September 11th, let's dive balls deep, let's get into this, okay? So when I started this channel, it was to look further into topics and then share that information with friends that I had back home when I moved out to the West Coast. And at first it started that way, and then the more I started learning about deeper into these topics, I started getting more and more concerned with how my reality was being challenged. And one of the biggest events that I ever invested some of my time into getting to know facts about was 9/11. I've been researching it since 2002. I mean, seriously, all the way back since I can remember. Every 9/11 tribute that was on TV, I'd watch it. Once YouTube came out, I started looking up videos constantly. Every year in September, I get into that like funk that I feel like a lot of kids go into about wanting to know more and why doesn't it feel like we walked away with anything. I mean, there's been no justice for that event that's taken place, and every year that goes by, we learn more and more information about how people we entrusted with our safety and the safety of this country were the ones deceiving us, and that is just not debatable to me at this point. Like, I don't understand the people who aren't awoken to the fact that this was an inside job of sorts. The only people who profited from this event were people in the Bush administration and Euro white men. That's all that profited from this. If you look back, all the villains that it created, the Osama bin Ladens, the Saddam Husseins, all of them are dead. They didn't get shit out of this. It wasn't their battle. I don't believe any of the story we were given, the narrative, all of it. I think it's fake. I want to rewind back to that time, September 11th, 2001. I myself was a junior in high school, so I was 16 years old. I just had gotten a car, so I was able to drive myself to school, so I could show up a lot later than I could the previous year. So I remember rolling up into class late, and my first class was a math class, and I often showed up late to that class, and that was normal. And I remember that was the last normal class I would ever have. And then I walked to second hour, and that was government, and that was the weirdest class to be in when this kind of event went down, because a government teacher who was so passionate about just government in general, politics, how it functioned, all of it, that was my teacher, and he was crying. I remember seeing my teacher crying during all this. Sorry, I just had a coughing fit. Not from a hit of weed, as you'd imagine. But I remember my teacher crying, and I'm not gonna lie, at 16, class of 30 of us, it was a big class, none of us really knew what was going on. It's sad to admit that now, to not really know what the World Trade Center is, the towers. We had seen them in, a trailer for the Spider-Man movie. Like, we were Midwesterners, we were fucking oblivious. Like, I look back and I realize how dumb we really were. Nobody in that class really knew what we were watching. We didn't know how severe this attack was because we didn't understand, like, what the buildings were. We didn't understand the significance. And then all the news media, it just, as we're now learning, it was just fluff. It was these pieces, this stuff to create a narrative. And I'm remembering that feeling of us all being confused but completely enamored with this information. I remember not a kid in my class was talking. Like, we were all just paying attention to the TV, and we were all surrounded around one TV. Like, sometimes just thinking about how simple it used to be. Like, this day changed everything in all ways. Like, it really affected how we deal with each other. It affected how we see right versus wrong, and how we are quick to blame and judge and accuse people who don't look like us or act like us or talk like us being a threat. And it's really interesting. It was a complete psyop on this whole country, but the youth, I mean, kids my age, we didn't realize what we were experiencing, and we had no idea. I always think back, the year before, when I was a sophomore, I took a history class that I'll never forget with my teacher, Mr. Tilka. I don't know if he still teaches, but he was the best, like, history teacher ever. I remember he had us do this project, this insane project that lasted so long, about the JFK assassination, and we were like, why is this like the biggest deal? And he was like, hopefully you do not have to live through an event where you can say, I know exactly where I was when that happened, and then the next year it happened. And it always has stuck with me that we lived through an event that we still, 15 years later, have not treated with the what am I looking for? Like the respect and the compassion and the tenaciousness of figuring out what actually happened that it deserves. It's really, really sad how people brush off 9/11. I was just watching this video about this guy. I'll maybe like put a link in my video or something in the comment section. But he was in Florida at a Florida campus, like Florida State or something, and he was just asking kids who were walking by to talk to him about Building 7 falling. And now I've never really cared much about Building 7 because to me, the first two were demolitions, inside jobs from the get. So I didn't need Building 7 to convince me. Also, the Pentagon, that was bullshit, never believed that was a plane. I mean, in my head, all these were either bioweapons or magnetic energy or drones. And it's that simple because, you know, fast forward 15 years, look at what we see used in modern warfare, the exact same things that brought down that building. And, you know, you can get real deep into some of this stuff. Like I was just talking to my friend Michaela, and she texted me. She's lived on the East Coast for over a decade. And granted, it was, you know, a good 5, 6, 7 years after 9/11 when she moved out there. However, she was saying she has many friends who grew up in New York or around New York, and she's never once met somebody who's lost someone they knew in that tragic event. And that just fucks with my head because of where I'm at right now on this journey, because I am not insinuating anything. However, I also don't want to be the kid who just brushes something off because, you know, ooh, asking that question might be a little too scary. But I think it is really interesting because I also know a lot of East Coasters, but I don't know anyone who knew anybody personally affected by the event. And personally affected, I mean in the building, like somebody who died. That's what I mean. Like, because the buildings came down, and I'm not saying that didn't happen, and they came down in a weird way, okay? And people have been affected with health issues ever since this happened, which makes me think some sort of bio thing. And if you look up Dr. Judy Wood, she looks into this. Those buildings didn't even collapse, they disintegrated. They just float into the air, they turned to dust. So she thinks it was this, I forget what she calls it, this energized weapon that would have probably been set off by, you know, trigger point bombs inside, which a lot of firemen and cops say they heard pop, pop, pop going off. All of this stuff to say, I don't know what happened that day. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know what happened that day, and either do you. And especially if you believe that narrative that we were supposed to believe after 9/11 of 2001, if you are buying into that it was this terrorist attack and Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, if you buy into that, you're asleep. And you are living, breathing, and walking around every day in the Matrix. And that movie is so real. It has so much esoteric messages, and it talks a lot about occult symbology and religion and all of it. If you haven't watched The Matrix and realized that that is real in some sort of capacity, because it's deep, and you can think of that movie as real in many ways. It has layers, and it was designed to be that way, because I want to do a video on the movie The Matrix. I have a feeling the Watch Out Ski brothers are actually just plants. And look at me sounding so conspiracy. I'll get into that later, but all to say the movie The Matrix might have been designed to give you a message real deeply hidden that it was supposed to. Like, I don't know if you're on this journey and how deep along with me you are, but as you look up information, you constantly find people who, like, if they're trustworthy, they will always tell you, don't believe me, look into this yourself. I absolutely agree with that. Never trust anything you hear from anybody, because you have to question everything. Every individual thing you have to question. And so I find this community of people's opinions who think that The Matrix was a CIA movie designed to, like, give us a message, and how they have to tell you it before they do it, or they have to tell you it as it's being done, the kind of, like, they'll hide it in plain sight. All of those kind of things, they all come into play, and they're connected with everything, and it happens all around you. And it's like, I feel like the more you wake up and the more you're able to see what's happening in front of you, to see that the media lies to you, see that the politicians lie to you, see that the food is not healthy to eat, see that the water's unsafe, like, the more that you realize this, the more you're starting to be able to see the Matrix for what it is, this fallacy that's going to fall apart at, one pull of the thread. But you can also start to read it. You start to read the coding. Like, my boyfriend and I last night watched the movie American Ultra, and I went into it knowing that movie was designed to give you a message. And he's like, wow, this is really weird, because the whole time I'm like, how do people not see, like, everything they're talking about is real and they're hiding it? And he's like, because that's the plan is to give it to you in a comedy movie starring Kristen Stewart and Jesse Eisenberg, to make you think, oh, this isn't real. Nobody would ever do this. Like, this is silly. Look how stupid they are. But, like, that's how they get it across. So, anyway, not to convince anybody of anything. I don't care what you believe. It's just weird to me that people still buy the original narrative of what happened that day. So that's all I wanted to say there. Also, look up Dr. Judy Webb. She's insanely brilliant, and she's insanely brave. And I, throw all respect her way for being as brave as she is, because she is being harassed, and her team that works with her is constantly harassed. She talks about it and how she chose to speak up against this and become very unpopular amongst many of the elite and her friends in society she would normally hang out with, because she is a scientist, and to say these kind of things is almost blasphemous in that community. But she's saying them because she said she had to. She was like, if I don't, who will? And that's a Paul Revere if I've ever heard one. I mean, granted, I don't know if Paul Revere was ever really good, because I'm learning, like, whoever we were supposed to growing up think was really good, like Christopher Columbus and George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, they weren't as good as you think they are. And then the people we were told to think were completely evil and gross and awful, sometimes they actually were doing something for a righteous cause. Now, this is a real mindfuck, because it really makes you question certain people. I'll let you go into that on your own. I'll have a video in the future discussing some of my mind fuckery I went through when I found out some of my idols growing up were actually some of the scariest people to walk this earth. And then the flip, when I found out a lot of people that I grew up hating were actually some of the bravest, most intelligent people I've ever, learned what their true journey was about. It's insane. Anyway, this video about 9/11, I just wanted to touch base. I wanted to kind of see what my community of hopefully more free-thinking people than the masses think about this event. Do you buy the narrative? Which, I don't get how, but do you? Or do you see what's going on? Do you see the facade? Do you have ideas or theories of your own that you want to talk about with people but you feel afraid to? Because if you do, then you'll get pegged as crazy or a conspiracy theorist. Talk about it freely here. We do that. Anyway, no judgment to whatever your beliefs are. I'm really not pushing anything or any of my beliefs onto you, because I love just having the discussion. That's all this is about, having a discussion, talking to people about why they think what they think. That's what I like doing. Anyway, take care of yourself for the rest of the day. I hope you enjoyed this video. Many more brilliant topics to come. And how about you keep them brilliant by adding to them? Anyway, peace out, Ganesh. Peace out to you. Take care.